Right now I'm in New Orleans trying out good food, sightseeing, and also comparing the cameras on Oppo Find N3 Flip versus the Galaxy Flip 5. And I switched over to the back camera just to show you a better quality version with the ultra wide so you can see more of the background. And also I noticed the resolution is a bit different. On the Flip 5 you can actually stay in 4K. On the Oppo you switch down to 1080p. So that can be a con for certain people that shoot a lot of video. So let me show you how it all works. Once you turn on the external display, it automatically changes to 1080p. And once you hit 4K, it automatically turns off the dual preview. Now, if you do it manually just by hitting the dual preview again, the annoying part is it doesn't auto switch back to 4K 30. So when you're using this feature, you would always need to remember to switch it back. And there were plenty of times where I forgot about it, so I ended up shooting in 1080p, which is nothing wrong with it, but I've always wanted to shoot it in the highest quality as possible. And when you're exploring out and about and on a boat trying to look for alligators, you don't have time to always remember to switch back to 4K 30. So that is one really annoying process on the Oppo. But it does have 2x, which is great when you are in a distance like this and you can't get too close to the subject, which is really helpful in these scenarios. And I think that is the biggest strength on the Oppo Find N3 Flip is that since it has a telephoto lens, your zoomed in pictures and videos end up being a bit more clearer and sharper than a digital zoom like on a Galaxy Z Flip 5. Now, when you're recording in clamshell mode, which is basically folded, this is my preferred way to vlog, and I realized that when you're shooting in this way, the Oppo Find N3 Flip doesn't have the best stabilization, but if you end up using dual preview mode while the whole phone is open, the stabilization seems to be a lot better, which I tested out and showed you guys on my other video about only the Oppo Find N3 Flip camera experience. Now, if you're just being stationary, of course it's gonna look pretty good. The little stabilization on Oppo is good enough to handle those little tiny movements. Now for the external display, the Flip 5 is a lot bigger, so doing little things like watching a quick video or scrolling through a news article, it's gonna be a lot more pleasing to the eye. And on Oppo, it's still big enough to do the daily task or just the little things. Now, if you are a creator like I am and want to see the full frame, it does seem like the Oppo is just slightly bigger. Now, if you're vlogging and taking pictures with the external display, then the Oppo might be better. Now, I quickly want to mention about the crease in the middle of the screen. On Oppo, it's barely there and you can't really feel it versus the Galaxy, which is very prominent and it's more visible. Now moving on to the pictures, they both do pretty good with the ultra wide and wide. I feel like a lot of the difference you'll see is more of the color temperature and just the colors in general. There are times where I feel like the Galaxy can be a bit too cool, and I do prefer the warmer look on Oppo, but it's not always consistent because there are other times where I see the Galaxy being more warmer than Oppo, so it just goes a lot of back and forth for me. As I mentioned earlier, the Oppo does have a telephoto lens, which if you do zoom in a lot, then definitely is going to be more useful in pretty much all scenarios. Now, if you're mainly vlogging, I noticed that I've mainly used ultra wide and wide, so maybe you really don't need a telephoto lens, but in terms of just taking pictures behind a camera, that's where I was really thankful having that telephoto lens to capture that moment. I would say shooting 2x on both of these phones, they seem to be very similar and you probably won't notice any huge difference unless you really zoom in. But once you get to about 5x, 10x, and 20x, which is the max on Oppo, that's where you can clearly see the huge difference. I do want to mention about the external display's camera UI, which I prefer the Oppo because it has the buttons that you're used to showing the ultra wide, wide, and 2x. On a Galaxy Z Flip 5, you don't have that option, so you would have to use your other hand to pinch to zoom, which I do find it pretty annoying and not as intuitive. Now for portrait mode, they both can shoot in 1x, but since the Oppo has a telephoto lens, it can zoom out to 2x or have a 2x option. Now I am leaning towards the Oppo on this just because I do like my warmer skin tone and it's just a bit more exposed. Especially in the scenarios where you're indoors or in the shade and the background is super bright or you just have a nice city view in the back. In these scenarios, it seems like Oppo does have the better exposed picture. Now for low light pictures, there are certain things where I go back and forth with, but I honestly think the Galaxy is a lot more consistent in these scenarios, especially when you have strong highlights in the picture. As you can see, it doesn't matter what lens you're using, the Galaxy have a really good exposure on these LED lights, whereas on Oppo is pretty overexposed. And just shooting in nighttime in general, phones don't really perform that well. So even if the Oppo does have a telephoto lens, there are times where it might be a bit cleaner, but it's not going to be too far off versus what you'll see during the daytime. And even at 2x, the Galaxy does seem pretty good, and it may even look sharper than a telephoto lens on the Oppo, but it could be because the stabilization isn't as good. Now for video, they're both not going to look the best, but I am leaning towards the Oppo just for the overall consistency and the quality. And that's only when the phone is opened, not when I'm using clamshell mode. But if it was only in clamshell mode, I will pick the Galaxy. Now if you're gonna shoot in 2x, the Oppo is just slightly cleaner, but I'm not too sure how often would you need to use this. Now ending this off with selfies, I think it's obvious that using a flip phone in general, it's really pointless using the front facing camera because you clearly have the back camera and you can see yourself. So why not use those cameras to take the better quality photo? Now for taking selfies like this, I'm leaning towards the Galaxy just because HDR in general seems to be more consistent and looks more natural than the Oppo. In the end, I feel like the Oppo is just more versatile and it feels like I'm using a regular phone that has a triple camera setup, so I'm not as limited as I am shooting with the Z Flip 5. So let me know your thoughts, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.